Prison is her distinguished husband, Nelson Mandela. Her natural beauty like the rising sun. In a matter of time, both her will be gone. So rise up, sister, rise to your call. Any day now, apartheid's got to fall. Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. They say every man has got his time. Yours is one we behold with pride. We'll be joining you as a warrior. We'll be there just to meet us at the border. So ride on, sister, ride on high. Reach for victory, reach for the sky. Oh, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Oh, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Me say one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. Hey, one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. Come on, one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. One by one, we are go Africa, one by one. So ride on, sister, ride on high. Reach for victory, reach for the sky. Oh, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Say Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Me say one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. One by one, we are beat down apartheid. But I remember the occasion very, very, very clearly. And at this time, I just want to say to all the people here, the show tonight, respect must be given when respect is due. I think you should all give yourselves a nice round of applause for being there and being part of the fight against apartheid. Come on. Yeah. And we just want to continue to welcome all freedom fighters wherever they are tonight. And at this time, we also need to think about Haiti, our fellow Caribbeanites, if you want to put it that way. 2, 3, and welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home, home, home. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home, home, home. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home, home, home. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. Oh, yes, with bread, make good good friend, set you free again. Oh Lord, give me a little calypso, man. Let's meet the red, make good friend. They are street again. Yeah, everybody, one more time. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. 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 27 years or more, locked in captivity. Wisdom and hope for the poor, joy for you and me. Apartheid has no place in society. Black and white for equal opportunity. Democracy, peace, and freedom in one but love. They won't stop the war. We can start the arms. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. 'Cause what we want a Mandela Day. We want a Mandela Day. We want. Did you hear that? We want a Mandela Day. Well, we think it's all Mandela Day. We want a Mandela Day. We want one. And guess what? If Mr. Mandela was here tonight, I know he would have felt very proud of you. And if he had had a chance to speak to you, I know he would have given you something like this. Now I'm back on my feet again. I walk proud down the street again. And they all look at me again. And they know that I'm strong. Oh, 'cause from a distance you look like a friend, even though we are at home. God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance. Hear me now, hear me now. Listen, brother, people say so. Hear me now, pom pom. And if Brother Bob Marley was here tonight, he too would have felt proud of you. And if he had a chance to sing something for you, I know he would have given you something like this. He was a buffalo soldier. Come on, everybody. Red Rock Rasta. Buffalo soldier. In the war for America. Why, yeah, yeah. Why, yeah, yeah, yeah. Why, yeah, 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 yeah. Why, yeah, yeah. Why, yeah, yeah, yeah. Why, yeah, 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 yeah. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome. Oh, oh, oh. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. Oh, yes, meet the friend, make good friend, set you free again. Oh Lord, give me a little calypso, man. Let's meet the friend, make good friend. They are street again. Yeah, everybody, one more time. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. 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 27 years or more, locked in captivity. Wisdom and hope for the poor, joy for you and me. Apartheid has no place in society. Black and white for equal opportunity. Democracy with peace and freedom in one but love. They won't stop the war. We can start the arms. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. 'Cause what we want a Mandela Day. We want a Mandela Day. We want. Did you hear that? We want a Mandela Day. Well, we think it's all Mandela Day. We want a Mandela Day. We want one. And guess what? If Mr. Mandela was here tonight, I know he would have felt very proud of you. And if he had had a chance to speak to you, I know he would have given you something like this. Now I'm back on my feet again. I walk proud down the street again. And they all look at me again. And they know that I'm strong. Oh, 'cause from a distance, you look like my friend, even though we are at war. God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance. Bang, 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 bang. Hear me now, hear me now. Listen, what the people say, so hear me now, pom pom. And if Brother Bob Marley was here tonight, he too would have felt proud of you. And if he had a chance to sing something for you, I know he would have given you something like this. He was a buffalo soldier. Come on, everybody. Red Rock Rasta. Buffalo soldier. In the war for America. Why, yeah. Why, yeah. Why, yeah. Why, yeah. Why, yeah. Why, yeah. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home.
Friday night. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Paying homage to Nelson Mandela and his wife, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. And as we continue to observe Black History Month, that was Caroline Davis, reggae songstress. I love her. She is certainly a dynamite. Out of Jamaica, of course, Caroline Davis, who Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela. We're expecting our two guests tonight. I know one is ready, and we're going to get going in a short while. We're going to be talking about corruption tonight. We're going to be talking about corruption tonight. It's all over, all over. Wayne Cesar is here. Audreyanna Thomas is going to be here shortly. And we are going to be talking about corruption. Corruption gripping our country, tearing our country apart, tearing our country apart. And we are going to be talking about that. Black History Month, all month we are going to be celebrating, highlighting some of our heroes and our heroines and the contributions of African Guyanese to Guyana and the world, to Guyana and the world.
Black heroine was someone with a willingness to confront the world. One of the Caribbean's most important political voices, a woman who fought for people's rights and survived her own battles. Ndaye is a trailblazer in true form. The name Ndaye, which translates to daughter comes home in Swahili, was born Sandra Williams on September 11, 1942, to a middle class family. She was educated at St. Sidwell's Primary, later attending the Bishop's High School for Girls, before going to the University of the West Indies in Mona, Jamaica in 1961 to 64. It was there that she earned a bachelor's degree in French and Spanish. In the 1970s, she would begin to cut her teeth politically in New York, taking a job at Queens College, City University. She was later persuaded to return to Guyana in 1978 to join the Working People's Alliance, a party of the Pan Africanist historian Walter Rodney, where she was a co founder. In 1980, after the assassination of Walter Rodney, Andaye, along with the women of the WPA, began asking questions about women's leadership, a search which would eventually lead to the creation of an autonomous women's organization in 1986 called Red Thread. The principal aim of this organization was to work with women across racial divides. She was also associated with the Global Women's Strike and an executive member of the Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action. The cancer survivor twice over was the founder of the Guyana Cancer Society and the Guyana Cancer Survivors Action Group. In 1997, she was awarded the Golden Arrow of Achievement. As someone who would often journal her thoughts and ideas over the years, she finalized a book called The Point is to Change the World, which is a compilation of her writings and essays. Andaye was known to have a self deprecating humor, not taking herself or the system too seriously. Yet she was radical and intentional in her activism, caring deeply about equality, about education, and issues that arose from class and gender. She worked extensively with both young men and women, teaching them the importance of raising one's consciousness before seeking to raise that of others. One of the finest radical revolutionaries to rise out of Guyana lost her battle with cancer after 30 years on May 31st, 2019. We salute Ndais for her relentless efforts to create and embody the change she wanted to see in society. Tomorrow, our Black History Month celebrations continue with the legendary John Agard, known to many as Popeye.
One of, one of my favorite human beings. As you would know, I have had the opportunity of working with Andai for over 40 years, almost 50 years. A great human being, a great human being. I always say when people ask me, do you believe in God? I said that's not a problem for me because I know God believes in me because he has given me the opportunity to meet some of the greatest, some of the most wonderful human beings in the world. And my life, coming from tatters, has been enriched by my association with these people. And I is one of those persons who I learned a great deal from and who taught me and others what it is to be human, what it is to be human. In the final analysis, whether we are politicians or we are professionals or we are working people, the salt of the earth, ultimately, we are human beings first and human beings last. Celebrating and I here tonight on Black History Month as we get ready to talk about corruption and corruption all over, all over, all over. Yes, some of you are asking to play Winnie Mandela, Winnie Mandela. All right, I am Winnie Mandela. Let's see here. Um, let's see here.
There's a woman fighting for freedom down in Africa. In prison is her distinguished husband, Nelson Mandela. Her natural beauty like the rising sun. In a matter of time, both her will be gone. So rise up, sister, rise to your call. Any day now, apartheid's got to fall. Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. They say every man has got his time. Yours is one we behold with pride. We'll be joining you as a warrior. We'll be there, just you meet us at the border. So ride on, sister, ride on high. Reach for victory, reach for the sky. Oh, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Oh, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Me say one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. Hey, one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. Come on, one by one, we are go Africa, one by one. One by one, we are go Africa, one by one. So ride on, sister, ride on high. Reach for victory, reach for the sky. Oh, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Say Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela. Me say one by one, we are go Africa.
Winnie Mandela, sung there by Carlene Davis. Carlene, Carlene, and we continue we continue to celebrate Black History Month here on Politics 101. Um, yes, I know reggae. I teach reggae. The thing with the reggae music, they are very serious with their copyright. So you have to be very careful. And then, yes, Marlon, I will. Next week, I'll play Miriam Makeba. Mama Africa, Miriam Makeba. I saw her as a child, She came to Guyana. She came to Guyana and she came to my village, Buxton. Oh my goodness. I continue to believe that she is the greatest singer of all time. There's no voice like Miriam Makeba. Miriam Makeba. I teach her in my course on music's political discourse. And next week, Marlene, I'm going to look hard and I'll make sure I find something to play on Miriam Makeba, where young people um, need to know. And we're featuring women tonight, and of course, Carlene Davis singing about Winnie Mandela and Nelson Mandela. Winnie Mandela, still a heroine in South Africa and Africa and the Pan African world. When you talk about strong women, yeah, Winnie Mandela, Winnie Mandela. All right, let's get going with our program tonight. We're going to be talking about corruption. We're going to be talking about corruption, which is running rampant in our country. And we have our two guests tonight, Audreyanna Thomas, and who's no stranger to Politics 101, and Wayne Cesar, who's no stranger to Politics 101, and who's no stranger to the fight on social media with his own program on Saturday nights. Over to you. Let's bring our guest in. And Wayne here is dressed like an African king tonight.
Hi, Wayne. Good evening. I like your outfit. Very nice.
Audreyanna, thank you all very much. Audreyanna and Wayne, what do you all know about Winnie Mandela and Nelson Mandela? When you hear those two names, what do they conjure up in your mind? I know I'd like to take you all off guard. You all think you all coming just to start corruption, but we got to talk culture a little bit. Audreyanna, I'll start with you, and I think judging from the looks, Wayne looked like he just barely lost his motor features. And you look like you lost your motor features
A little while.
last year. A little while. So I'll start with you.
Okay, so I grew up hearing about Miriam Makeba and also listening to her music. And Nelson Mandela nevertheless was a particular. I had, and I still have a particular interest in Nelson Mandela, and now in his work. Nelson Mandela was one of my 5 favorite people. And my 5 favorite people, they were Nelson Mandela, Kofi Annan, Barack Obama, pilot Sullenberger, who landed the plane in the Hudson River, and Maya Angelou. And the reason they are my favorite people, I have always wanted to ask them one question: how did you do it? And I have had the opportunity to meet Kofi Annan. I met Kofi Annan. I was in Geneva in 2018. If you notice, I have his photograph on my my WhatsApp as well as my LinkedIn.
Right, yes.
And I met Kofi Annan in Geneva. I was sitting on a UN board in the UNOPS, United Nations Office for Projects and Services steering committee, and we had a farewell for our chairperson, who was taking on a very senior position in the UN, and Kofi Annan was there. As a matter of fact, the chairperson was taking on the second highest position in the UN, and Kofi Annan was there. So I went to him and I said, Mr. Anand, I've always wanted to meet you. How did you do it? And he looked straight at me, almost as if he was looking straight into my soul, because he realized that this question was loaded. And he looked at the floor, and then he looked back at me. And then he repeated what I said. He said, how did I do it? And he looked me straight into the eye and he said, persistence. He said, you have to be persistent. And so I have that photograph with Kofi Annan on my WhatsApp and on my LinkedIn. And every time when life gets difficult, I go back to what he said to me. You have to be persistent. And so that's my little story there with Kofi Annan. I've never been able to, and so I followed Nelson Mandela. I followed the all of the movements towards when he was released from prison. And one thing I'd like to say about what's something he said that stuck with me, and that was he was doing an interview. I can't remember what was the name of the interviewer, and the interviewer asked him, "How did how was it that you used to read the papers every day and you were in prison?" He said, "When you're doing something great, something that is impactful." I am using my own words here. He said, "There are people who look out for you." And so apparently every day a prison warden used to bring the newspapers for him. So he was able to read the news every day. And I think after he came out of prison, he and that prison warden they became friends. But what was important about what he said, and there are times when you would think that, oh, Dr. Hines, you, Wayne, myself, we're in this struggle and we're in this struggle alone. And but people are looking. People are looking, even if it's to bring the newspapers for you every day, because that's all they can do based on the position that they have or where they are. Um, Even that was sufficient for Nelson Mandela to be kept up to date with the news for the 27 years that he was in prison. So yes, a little bit.
It's interesting that you tell that story. It is no secret here that I spent 3 years and 3 months in prison. And when I was at Sibley Hall in um, Mazaruni, in those days, you were allowed 2 books in your cell. Well, I had about 20 books in my cell, and I never asked why I was given that privilege. Because when you're in prison, you read everything. You read everything. I remember reading Newsweek from cover to cover, including advertisements. But when I got out of prison, and they had a kind of welcome service for me at the Ursuline convent there on church. What is the street name there? Not Main Street. Um, Miller Street. No, why am I missing? Anyhow,
Street, that's
um,
Camp and Church
Camp
Street.
Street, Camp Street, Camp Street, Camden Church Street. Yes. I didn't go to Guyana for a couple of months, and they had a welcome service there for me, and the person who was in charge of the prison was sitting there, and then I realized, he was a Catholic, and in those days, Father Malcolm Rodriguez was very close to us in the WPA, and then we can say he was a WPA member. And Malcolm was his priest, and he looked out for me. I didn't know it then, but reading, it was what you did. At one time, I would go by the bars at night, and the light would come in from outside, and I would stand there and read because they turn off the lights at 9 o'clock, and I would stand there and read, and I almost went blind. They had to carry me to see the eye doctor and so on and so forth. So it's interesting that Nelson Mandela talked about that story. I had not heard it before. Have you had a chance to interact with Andaya?
Um, Occasionally, not. I can't say that I knew her very well, but occasionally I'd had interactions with her, either when I was doing community development, in work in the environment, or other areas. So, but from what I know, even though I haven't necessarily, I can't say that I knew her. What I know of her work, it's it's admirable, for the want of a better word, but also it's it's inspirational. It is people like Andai, um, Walter Rodney, UC Quayano, Nelson Mandela, um, Kofi Annan. I would put these people are they come around once in a lifetime, and I think in their purpose. is more profound for some of them after they would have left. And I would even put Martin Luther King in that category. And I think that even as we try to find a pathway, because this is really going to transition us into our conversation on corruption and other things. But corruption doesn't happen out of context. We are what we're discussing here is that context of humanity, that context of blackness, that context of culture, that context of consciousness, that context of and so these are people under Walter Rodney. It wasn't just about politics. Yes, they were involved in politics, but it was politics in a context. And I think what we're missing now is that context of humanity, that context of continuity, that context of forever, if I can put it that way. And so that's how I see, and I would say more, that's how I feel the work of Andai. It's more
Thank you
than
very much.
something
And
you
I'm going to
see.
come back on that same topic, but let's bring in young Wayne Cesar. Wayne, you've heard Sister Audreyanna, your thoughts on the Mandelas. I don't know whether you interacted with Andai or know of her,
Mhm.
but talk to us.
Yeah, Sister Audriana, that's a tough act to follow right there. That was some good history there. Thank you so much. Well, Dr. Hines, well, I happen to know about Nelson Mandela, and when I think of Nelson Mandela, and besides a strong man, there must be a strong woman. So I wouldn't mention his name without mentioning his wife,
Yes,
Miss Winnie Mandela. I
yes,
see the two of them as, I saw the two of them as the face of the fight against the apartheid regime in South Africa. And the fact that Nelson Mandela would have served 27 years in prison. Okay. And Dr. Hines, you know about boxing. In a boxing match, when you get knocked down, he get knocked down for 27 years. And he came out of it fighting, you know, says a lot, right? And it paints a picture and give us today reason why we should be fighting, because what Nelson Mandela fought for, you know, it is that is right. Okay. So I feel empowered, when I think of a Nelson Mandela, when I think of a Walter Rodney, these are individuals that stands out to me. A Martin Luther King, and that speech on Washington where he said he had a dream. Well, we are still trying to fulfill that dream today. Okay. And that speech is still relevant in the context of the world that we are living in today.
Still
Right.
relevant in the context of the world that we're living in today. In case you're just joining us, yes, it's Friday night. Dr. Adams is not with us tonight, but we have two well-known faces in the struggle here with us, and we intend to talk eventually about corruption, and which this week has really taken our country by storm. Let me say good night and good evening to some people here. Ernest Elliott. Ernest, I noticed some missed calls on Messenger from you. Call Kadaki and get my number, but I think I have your number. I'm going to call you this weekend. Messenger is a place I don't go very often. Not because I diss people there, but the time. I don't get, but I was perusing a message and I noticed that you've been trying to get in touch with me. Good evening to Nima Flubes. Nima, please get yourself to the ready, because next week is going to be your time, so you can start padding up. Um, Uh, Welcome to Politics 101, my countrywoman Linda Coquet. Thank you very much. So many of you here tonight. Lester, Marlin, Marcia, Blackie, yes. So many of you. Some of the old timers, yes. Saw when Miriam Makeba performed at the national park. Yes. There's a Burnham. They like Shabbat. Beautiful black woman, and oh my goodness, I was a child. Stokely Carmichael, who she was married to, also came, and it was such a pleasure to see those great Africans come to our shore. And for those people my age, you all will remember, in the early 70s, from Kenneth Kaunda to Seresti Kama to Malumi from Tanzania. Um, all of them came to Guyana. Burnham brought them to Guyana, and they all came. They all came to Guyana, and we, as children in those days, school children, we had the privilege of meeting them. And there, every year, somebody was coming, sometimes twice per year, some leader from Africa. As you all know, Guyana played a pivotal role in the anti-apartheid struggle. Small nation, but we had a subvention in our budget. Every year, Burnham had a subvention in that budget to contribute to the anti-apartheid struggle. And so many of the anti-apartheid fighters, they traveled the world on Guyanese passport. We played a pivotal role under Forbes Burnham in the anti-apartheid struggle. The first contribution to the anti-apartheid struggle came from Buxton. Brother U.C. Kwayana was going in 1964 to visit 13 African countries on behalf of Mr. Burnham as his emissary, 1965, sorry. And, they had a reception at Tipperary Hall for him. And he collected a donation there and took it when he went to Africa and gave it directly to the anti-apartheid fighters. I think it was 20-something pounds, because we were still, as you all know, in 1965, we were still a colony. And so we were using the pound, shillings, and pence. And Brother UC took that donation from Buxton and was able to convince Mr. Burnham when he came back, because he went there on behalf of Mr. Burnham to contribute to the anti-apartheid struggle. And so Guyana was in the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement. Jamaica, as early as the 1950s, banned any goods coming from South Africa from going into Jamaica. Some of that history, of Guyana and our Caribbean is worth noting. Audreyanna, let me go back to you, because you took us to a place. The human element. And I can tell you, Kwayana, Andaye, Clive Thomas, all of them, they taught us politics. But more than that, they taught us what it is to be human. That the human being must be at the center of your political engagement. And so therefore I would like to begin our conversation on corruption tonight by asking the question, is the corruption that we've seen from 1992 to the present, except for that 5 years when it abated under the coalition, does it say something about the way in which the government and state have combined to mess with our humanity, make the connection between our humanity or inhumanity and the corruption, the level of corruption that we're seeing in Guyana. Audreyanna, you first, and then Wayne.
Dr. Hines, I think that we are at a point where we're challenged. But this challenge has created an enormous opportunity to transform Guyana into that same one people, one nation, one destiny that we've been, that was just an aspiration. As I process Guyana, I think that we will thank God for 2020 one of these days. We will thank God for the period from 2025. I'm going to come back to 1992, but I'd like to deal with the period of 2025 to 2020,
I mean,
2020,
2020 to
2020 to
2025.
2025. I think that Black people, and I'm saying this, Black people, we thought as Afro-Guyanese, we thought that, okay, nothing can be worse than slavery. So we overcame slavery. And then we were under colonialism. And I'm going to add in indentureship too. So then there was indentureship. And then there was the colonial rule, which ended in 1966. And I think we thought that, okay, we can now sleep with both eyes closed. 2020 has what 2020 has demonstrated to me as a Black person is that maybe as a Black person, because I have no control over the color of my skin, I may never be able to sleep with both eyes closed again. We may always have to have one eye open for some fool who's going to come up someday and think that because of the color of our skin, they can determine whether we are a human being or not. And I'd like to come back to 1992 in the Guyana context. I think what we're beginning to see is socialization. You talk about it a lot. And the government of the PPP and the government of the PNC, the people who get into those governments were socialized differently. And if we're really going to solve our problems and address corruption, I think we have to come back to that socialization. And so we were socialized differently because, and so what we are experiencing, we're experiencing, we really have two Guyanas, where on the one hand, we have some of our citizens are socialized differently, and some of our other citizens are socialized differently. So when you bring those people who were socialized differently into position of governance, they're influenced by their socialization. And I was reading, and to put science to this, I was studying. There is this book by I think it's he's a social psychologist. I'll tell you his name in a minute. But when you think of Guyana, we have two Guyanas. So what we do, we feel that okay, give people authority, and that's going to give us one Guyana. The time has come for us to understand that we're socialized differently. And we now have to start study that socialization so that when we put people into government and we give them the authority, they can understand the humanity of the Indo-Guyanese and the humanity of the Afro-Guyanese. And so I'll share this with you. I grew up on the East Bank, and I never knew that I was Black until I was 21. Because we grew up. If you know, see my face, I have Amerindian in me also, right? And but we grew up thinking that we're human beings. I cannot tell you in my home that I heard my parents talking about race was never really a conversation because my family was always mixed up and we were always race was never a conversation. When I first realized that I was black was when I was 21. And I'll tell you, it was in 1992. I was standing, I remember it so vividly. I was standing on the corridors of the High Court because I was a clerk I was working at the High Court as a registrar. And a lawyer came to me and he said, Miss Thomas, what are you studying? I said, communications. And the PPP had just won the elections and he said, good, because you're going to need that for the next elections. That was when I realized I was Black, Dr. Hines. I was 21 years old. All the time I thought I was just a human being and a Guyanese. And I left there with my mouth open, and another lawyer came and saw me. I'm sharing my personal experience. Another lawyer came and saw me standing there dazed. I won't call the lawyer's name. And she said to me, what happened, Miss Thomas? At the time, I was Justice Bernard's clerk. Until now, some of the old lawyers call me Justice Bernard's clerk. So I was standing outside of Justice Bernard's chambers with my mouth open, trying to think, what did I do for him to say that? And she came to me, she said, Miss Thomas, what happened? And I said to her, the lawyer just said to me, asked me what I'm studying. I told him communications, and he said, good, you will need that for the next elections. That was the beginning of my alertness and my awareness that something happened in 1992 that was different.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, when coming, and you can take it from whatever angle you want to take it from, because I'm trying to work ourselves in from the general to the particular. You go to school. They always tell you you can work from the particular to the general. Work it in so that we try to understand this phenomenon that has gripped our country.
Yes.
And Audreyanna there is take us to a place of socialization. And I know some people are going to want to jump on her, but I know exactly what she's talking about. We grew up in a country hearing that one race, no business good, and they can do business, and the other race don't know business, and they can't do business. And maybe that formulation has come back to haunt our country. That formulation has come back to haunt our country because I think in many respects, this government is living out that myth because it's a myth. And they've taken that myth to lawless proportions. Huh? Because over time, we have socialized people to believe that myth. And so therefore money over time becomes God. Huh? Money replaces God. Because you are told that God put you on this earth to manipulate money. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hines and Audreyanna. Well said. Dr. Hines, I believe that when Guyana was led by Lyndon Forbes Barnum, and then obviously Comrade Hugh Desmond Hoyt, I believe that we were in a pretty solid position when it comes to social cohesion, amongst other things, because I believe that Barnum was a leader that, for the most part, everyone got a piece of the pie. Okay, a lot of Guyanese of East Indian descent would have gotten a lot of lands, a lot of farming lands, a lot of things on the Lyndon Forbes Sampson Barnum. Okay, but I just want to quickly move from that era into the era of 1992. Let's start off with 1992, where the PPPC would have had 23 straight years of reign over Guyana. I believe that the PPP had a vision, and that vision was to gain what we call ethnic supremacy. Okay. I believe that the black man was studied and studied well, okay, by the PPP. They were well studied. The PPP got into power in 1992, and then over those 23 years, Dr. Hines, I am of the belief that the Guyanese people were conditioned. Okay. That's why, and that would have led to what we are dealing with today. And like you would have said earlier, Dr. Hines, how can you gain ethnic supremacy? By gaining wealth. Wealth is power. Money is power. Okay. So that is the mechanism, that the PPP would have used. Okay. I believe, Dr. Hines, that corruption started since in 1992. And as we go more into the conversation, you know, I'm going to explain where I believe that this corruption is a far stretching network that was built up over many years.
You see, my co-leader, Professor Clive Thomas, whose name is now synonymous with cash transfer and cash grants and so on, because he introduced it in 2018, not in the form of what the PPP is doing with it. But prior to that, he had introduced a term which was quite popular during the last decade, the criminalization of the state, in which he talked about the fusion of criminality with the state, so that the state accommodated criminal activity, and the criminal activity then found itself into the workings of the state, to the point that you cannot distinguish between a criminal and a state actor. All right? No, my God, corruption surfaced under Mr. Burnham, no doubt about it. In 1971, Brother U.C. Kwayana challenged Mr. Burnham. He said, I'm hearing of corruption in government. They fell out over corruption, he and Burnham. And Kwayana went to the ombudsman and complained. But Burnham took some steps. He set up an integrity commission. All right? He didn't do as what I heard Mr. Jagdeo did last night, well, yesterday, in which he decided, he is judge and jury, that there are accusations against Mr. Greaves, and that he said Mr. Greaves told him the money that buy the house is clean money, and he's satisfied. I don't think the chap understand the imperiality, the imperialness of what he was saying.
Yeah.
That I jacked you.
Sure.
I jacked it because he has become so intoxicated with power that he doesn't understand he's talking like a king. Lincoln Lewis always tell me, David, them people that are not governors, they're not they're rulers. They're rulers. The queen was the ruler, and she sent her representing the governor to places like Guyana. And that chap and those people are behaving like rulers. You listened to Mr. Jagdeo yesterday, and the man has made it very clear that I do not mind corruption so long as I am satisfied with the corruption. And if I don't satisfy with the corruption, then it is corruption. If I am satisfied with it, then it's not corruption. Audreyanna Thomas, over to you.
And Dr. Hines, I'd just like to say, when I said earlier that when I realized, I'd just like to clarify that a bit, that I realized I was Black when I was 21. I didn't mean it in the literal sense. I knew that I was a Black
No, no, no.
African.
I know what you mean. I know, no, no.
Okay, but um, so I think the I was listening to some of what Mr. Jagdio said yesterday. The other thing he said that was alarming was that um, he, when they were asking him about the Edamad aspect of this matter, he said, but Glenn Lal got issues too. And so let the Starbuck News or some other newspapers, but not
Not
Kaiser
at your
News.
news.
And I was like, what? So what you're saying, Mr. Jagdio has in his mind, in his head, he is thinking that he is a king and he's ruling over a kingdom. So don't send Kaiser News, send Starbuck
Guyana
News or one of
Times.
the other agencies.
Yes.
And so today I was perusing the preamble or the messages in the budget to see what they were talking about institutions. And I looked at the finance minister's presentation and the president's message, and I didn't see anything about institutions. And I thought, there you go. So, in the absence of, because what if you go back to the whole history of the when the monarchy was transitioning into a parliament in England, into parliamentary system in England, they had, this was when they were strengthening, focusing on institutions and strengthening the institutions, making the institutions function independent from the monarchy. And so I thought that one of the reasons why we have the weakening of institutions, while there was corruption under every government, there will always be corruption under every government, but the degree of the corruption is the
Yes.
issue. And
Yes.
so under the PNC,
And how the government in question, Audreyanna,
yes,
as we would say, I don't mean to cut you, but to cut
yes,
you, right?
yes,
All your thought, because when you know my retort, it is not that under any government there is going to be corruption or the threat of corruption, but you're looking at the degree of the corruption, and you're looking to what the government is doing to clamp down on corruption, to contain corruption. And then my point was that corruption raised the dead under Mr. Barnum. But there were people who challenged it. Quayana challenged it. And Quayana had the moral authority to challenge it. When he spoke, it meant a lot. And Mr. Burnham responded. And many people would tell you, Burnham dead and he left couple cow for your wife and so on. And ask a car driving a broken down car and so on. The point I am making is that corruption was contained better under the PNC than it is under the PPP. Yes, go on, go ahead.
guys, not only was corruption contained, racism was managed also.
Yeah. They did a better job of managing it. Yes.
And so under the and so the corruption that and in addition to that, under the PNC, under Burnham, we had strong institutions. So when you have strong, functional, effective institutions with well-trained professionals, that's another way of countering corruption, preventing corruption from running away. I think what we have seen is and if we go back to 1992, I'd also like to say when Dr. Chedi Jagan took over, I remember working at GTV at the time, and he had a system where, for example, on the boards, workers, representatives were on the boards. And I think Dr. Chedi Jagan started off with an objective of developing a society that was more sort of continuing from the PNC, or I should say a society that was more, how to put it, I'm trying to be a little careful, but I think his intention was to develop a society where the worker had an involvement in terms of governance and management and administration. And also, I don't think that it was Dr. Chedi Jagan's intention for the PPP to become what it has become today, which is not a workers' party, which is not which is essentially a party for the elites. So I was, and I can say that because I was elected at GTV as the workers' representative on the board during the Chedi Jagan administration. So I wanted to point that out because people will say that you're only talking about Barnum, but you're not talking about any good thing
Yes,
about from the
yes,
PPP.
yes,
I'm trying
yes,
to bring the balance here.
yes,
And, but I think that I think Mr. Jagdeo is a flawed person. And I say this without any fear of contradiction. And if you have a flawed leader, then his leadership style will be flawed. The way he conceptualizes the society and the way he design public policy and policies and the way he and implement those policies and the way he governs will be flawed. And I think what we're seeing here is a flawed leader who has essentially taken over the reins of our country. I was thinking about him today, and I'm thinking he set the play field. He determines which game we will play and which game we will not play. He set the rules, and he determines who will play the game and who will not play the game. And I was thinking today that what we need to do is to change the playing field for Mr. Jagdeo,
yes, yes.
switch
And,
up
and,
the
and, and
whole game
right,
because
right.
and set new rules. And a part of that is one, we're addressing the challenge, but we also need to look at what are the opportunities this challenge has created for us. And so, I think the corruption ran away, and I'll be very specific because there's a scripture in the Bible which says, "Call it as it is," and I'm calling it as it is. And I'm saying Mr. Jagdeo is the fault line in the major fault line in the PPP and in governance in Guyana. And the fact that he has been in government for so long, corruption has become a pandemic.
A pandemic,
And
and yeah, yeah. Let's try to bring Wayne in here, and I will stretch what you say a little bit further because we've seen it with Mr. Trump in the United States of America. He's a flawed. Jack Dio is flawed. I agree with you completely, and he has normalized flawed governance, but he is not singular because there is a critical mass of people who feed him and tell him that he's God, he's right, and so on and so forth. So he represents a phenomenon that is completely different from the Jagons. I was told by my close friends in the old PPP that when this thing started, Mrs. Jagan would go to some of the comrades' houses, and when she go inside and she see what in those houses, she would turn back and go away because she couldn't believe that these people that she socialized and Dr. Jagan socialized, that they had become so materialist, but not just materialist, but were feeding off the state as a way of generating wealth. When Cesar, the PPP has normalized and institutionalized corruption in Guyana. Take it away.
And Dr. Hines, I could not have agreed more. Like we spoke about when Lyndon Forbes Sampson, you know, when Lyndon Forbes Sampson Barnum was told by the Honorable Mr. U.C. Kayana that he believed that there was corruption, what did he do? He put measures in place to mitigate that corruption. Well, let's switch to the PPPC now. When we talk about corruption, okay, the PPP has put measures in place to further enhance the corruption. Okay? Case in point, Dr. Hines, we just have to simply look at the video with Barajagdio and Sue. You know, it is so obvious that it was the vice president of Guyana making a deal. You understand me? Unknown to the people of Guyana, unknown to the public. Okay? So it just paints the picture to me. I believe, Dr. Hines, that Barajagdio is the face of corruption in Guyana. Okay? And there is no way that we can eradicate corruption in Guyana with Barajagdio being at the helm. He could never be at the helm because he is part and parcel of what the Guyanese people are experiencing now with corruption. And Dr. Hines, corruption, let's say this. When you look at Guyana from a holistic perspective, the scope of corruption in Guyana is quite wide. It is in every sector, whether you're looking at oil and gas, whether you're looking at gold, whether you're looking at infrastructure, it is in all the different sectors, and it spreads beyond the boundaries of Guyana, meaning that there are outside sources that is coming into Guyana, okay, and investing in Guyana and are partaking in the corruption. Case in point, Dr. Baldio, who was recently interviewed by Travis Chase. And my analysis of that interview as a public accountant is that Mr. Baldio was lying through his teeth. He was aware of everything that he was investing in. Okay, he had the full picture, Dr. Hines. Okay, you look at his expression alone and you can tell. All right, and I'm going to go further to say this. Irfan Ali and Vice President Barajagdio, they are fully aware, okay, of the corruption when it comes to land in Guyana, okay, and the distribution of land. No wonder why the poor in Guyana cannot get a little house lot, because they are outbidded by the external investors who can come in and buy 75, 100 acres and all of these large amounts of land.
Below market price.
Yes, because they have the capital to do so. And since you're going to go and say that time, since you're going to hit on that point below market price, let's just touch on Prattville very, very quickly, where Jagdio and all the ministers in the PPP would have purchased lands and built big mansions in Prattville. Many of those individuals have sold those properties for 2 and 3 times the amount that they would have purchased it for. And I am sure there were no capital gains taxes paid on the gains that they would have gained from the sale.
Hold the thought there, because remember we had an institution called SARA.
Yes.
State Asset Recovery Unit, headed by one of my elders, Professor Clive Thomas. And Sarah had unearthed a lot of that kind of stuff and brought it into the open. And as soon as the PPP came in, one of the first institutions they shut down was Sarah. If you are going to contain corruption and contain or deter people from thieving from the state, are you going to shut down the organization that was set up to deter people? I'm making the point that both you and Audreyanna are making here. You know, Audreyanna is an institutional person. Here is it. The coalition government put in place an institution that would deter people from thieving from the state. But more than that, recover assets that were stolen from the state. And you come in, and the first thing you do is shut that institution down. It is this clear signal that you have no intention of repaying what was stolen from the state or deterring further thieving from the state. Just want to throw that in there. Back to you, Wayne.
Yeah, and Dr. Hines, when you look at the position that this government has taken when it comes to corruption, which is to do absolutely nothing, okay? And like I said, the scope of corruption is wide, okay? And it is happening in GCOM, which is the main body, right? Supposed to be an independent body. We talk about independence. I think Audreyanna touched on that. It is supposed to be an independent body responsible for free and fair elections in Guyana. That body has been infiltrated by the PPPC. And Audreyanna touched on this. Bara Jagdeo, okay, he wants to determine what game we are going to play. So he is using the Guyana Elections Commission to determine what game we are going to play come 2025 elections. And I love the rebuttal from Mr. Norton today that if the PPP rigs the 2025 election, things are not going to be nice. No, Dr. Hines, I agree and I support that position 100%. That is the way we need to react when we have a tyrant like Bara Jagdeo. Like Audreyanna said, we need to set the rules of how the game is going to be played. And that's a start.
Audreyanna, I come back to you. And again, I go to institutions. And the closing down of Sarah should signal to us where this government was going when it came into power. Elaborate on that.
You know, let's go back to before the no confidence motion. And I thought that not only me alone, but many people felt that many people had issues with the APNU and EFC government, the coalition government. And they felt that if the PPP had only waited until 2020, they might have won the elections and we would not have had all of this chaos. But when you examine the rush to bring that no confidence motion, to bring the government down. And I remember listening to a program where the person is a minister now in the PPC government, and they were saying that we don't want them to get their hands on the oil money. And one would have thought that to go through all that, bring a no confidence motion and to bring a government down, that the PPPC would have had a plan for this country. That you would have had a plan as to what you're going to do with the oil money. So you can't wait to get the coalition out of government so that you can implement your plan. And I was having a conversation recently with people who were saying that we now realize that the plan was really to make the coalition not get their hands on the oil money, but for the PPP to get their hands on the oil money. And I think, and it is as clear as day. So what we every institution, and this is the other thing from 2020, almost every institution this government has weakened. They have even rolled back their own gains prior to 2015, because in 2015, for example, there were when the country was getting more support from the international community to do institutional strengthening and capacity building. A lot of capacity was built. We strengthened, and a lot of institutions were strengthened. Now we have come to a place where the Assistant Commissioner Calvin Brutus last week, I think, wrote after this tribunal was set up that if the government wants to address corruption, it has to start in Main Street and in Chandrapal Drive. This is your Assistant Commissioner of Police saying, we know what he meant by Main Street. We know what he meant by, for those who don't know, by Main Street, he meant State House. That is where the president resides. When we refer to Main Street, by Chandrapal Drive, he meant the office of the president. And this is the Assistant Commissioner. Now, an assistant commissioner of police, now he's in the know. And for him to say if you want to address a corruption, it has to start there. A number of other things we have seen. Not only the disbanding Sarah, we've seen the Police Service Commission that Mr. Paul Slow was the chairman for. That Police Service Commission was disbanded, and then another Police Service Commission was set up. And we saw all of the other issues as it relates to the institutions which are supposed to provide oversight and accountability and transparency. And so it was very clear when we saw the government's approach to institutions that the government does not intend to operate above the board. But what we did not know, that they would have gotten this corrupt. This level of corruption, Dr. Hines, it is so enormous and ridiculous that it is people who you don't expect to be corrupt are now involved in all of this. Senior ministers, and I'm saying this, I want to let the government come ask me which ministers, right? Senior ministers of government who are in charge of government agencies are involved in corrupt practices, not only senior and junior ministers. And it has become the norm instead of the exception. So part of this is that the challenge is that, and coming back to Mr. Barajagio, I would like to know in terms of the pathway. To me, he was never clear on what is the pathway for Guyanese to move from poverty into wealth. And I think what he has done, he has designed a pathway. And this pathway, it's about wealth, accumulating wealth. It's about wealth creation. And so he has designed a pathway. And this pathway is through corruption. And now I think what is evolving is an oligarchy. An oligarchy where we will have police officers, the head of the Ghana police force, who would be so wealthy that they don't have to spend their salary. They don't have to, and when you have that happening in the society, you know, when I was studying, I studied peace building, and we had to choose a country that had conflicts. And some of my colleagues chose Sudan, some chose Somalia, I chose Haiti. And so I studied the causes of conflicts in Haiti. And one of the reasons why it's difficult to solve the conflicts in Haiti is because Haiti's conflict problem has to do with former police officers and former army officers, and who highly skilled and well-trained people in military and security. And so there are those issues there. I don't want to divert too much. So what we need Mr. Jagdeo to do, this playing field that he has developed, that has caused corruption to run away, or not what we need him to do, what we need to do, and we as in the people of Guyana.
There you go.
This playing field up. Yesterday, when you listen to and I'll pause here. Yesterday, when you listen to Mr. Jagdeo is very comfortable. He said he didn't even say that, oh, we're going to investigate Mr. Greaves. He said Mr. Greaves has said to me, just like you said, Dr. Hines, that he got the money to good and proper means, and that's fine. He didn't even say that he's going to investigate him or anything. But then he said that Glenn Lal should not speak because Glenn Lal X, Y, and Z. It reminds me in 2022, when the US Human Rights Report came out. I think it was in 2022 or 2023. I think it's 2022. Mr. Jagdeo said at one of his press conferences that instead of saying that he would appoint a commission to review the human rights report and to address the issues which were raised. That's how a democracy works. That's how a normal government should work. He said no. He said, oh, the report has some inaccuracies. So Mr. Jagdio's approach, and now I'm exposing so that he know that we're studying him and we know that he is flawed. His approach, instead of appointing a commission to review the human rights report and address the issues, he said, oh, the report has some inaccuracies. That's not what we want as the people of Guyana, Mr. Jagdio. What we would have liked is for you to say, I'm going to set up a commission to review the report, right? Guyana is not a perfect country. Our government is not perfect. And so we're happy that the US government did the review and the analysis, and we will set up a commission to review so that next year when they do another human rights report, some of these issues which were raised this year would have been addressed. And so the people of Guyana, like I said, we have to switch up the playing field for Mr. Jagdio so that he doesn't come out there every Thursday alone. He will come out with his ministers. A proper press conference should be where he comes out there with somebody who is moderating the press conference. He is coming in as he's the second vice president. He is in charge of energy and environment. And so he speaks with regards to his portfolio, right? He is not the president, and it's time the president take control of his government. And we would like to see for the press conferences that he brings out the Minister of Natural Resources, and the Minister of Natural Resources speak on his portfolio. He brings out the Attorney General, right? The Attorney General speaks on legal matters, not for the Vice President to come out here as if he is the government. He's not the government. And as if he's the president. He's not the president. So I say tonight to President Irfan Ali, take control of your government. And even if you have to fire the Vice President, we will support you, right? Fire the Vice President so that you will get the space to not rule, but to govern this country. We have not seen the best of the president because the Vice President is there shadowing you out, crowding you out.
Maybe the president doesn't have a best.
Well, you're being very optimistic. I was trying to be kind, Dr. Hines.
To be kind. I know. You weren't dragged up. You were brought up, and you get manners. When come right in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Hines, when we look at this whole thing of corruption, I believe it's time that we stop playing softball and we need to start playing some hardball here. It is glaring. It is obvious what is happening. If we do financial audits or forensic audits of every government official in the PPP and their acquaintances, Dr. Hines, they will be showing a lot of orange uniforms. This is obvious. It's no doubt. You can see it. You don't even have to get into numbers. You don't even have to ask people to source their wealth or source their capital. Okay, I look at corporations in Guyana like sheriff corporations and these big massive, companies that just showed up all of a sudden. Dr. Hines, no proper reporting. All right, you don't know who the investors are. Okay, we cannot source their capital, but the businesses just exist in Guyana. Our standards have got to change. And how do we change our standards? How do we mitigate corruption? Well, it starts with the people. The people needs to get involved with their politics. The people needs to vet the leaders that they put out there to represent them. We need people who is going to go and make what you call it? We can call it what John Lewis called it. Let's go and make some good trouble in Parliament. Let's bring the Guyanese public to Parliament when we go to Parliament as an opposition. All right? Dr. Hines, if we do not take a strong position on this, it will never stop. Barry Jagdeo is set in his ways. He will not pivot. He does not have a vision of prosperity for the people of Guyana because he does not care about them. He has never come on a broadcast and say that he cares for the Guyanese people. He loves them. He wants to see, the quality of life for the normal Guyanese, in a better place. You have never heard such words from a Barry Jagdeo. Okay? So those people who want to sit down and call him a leader and their VP and their leader, they are a failure to their counterparts in Guyana, and they are a failure to themselves. Because this man has sat for 23 years. Now he has sat for this 5 years. And look at the condition of the Guyanese people. There are many people, Dr. Hines, who have put themselves on the lines for a piece of land in Guyana that are now deceased. Their dreams were never realized. How long are we going to allow this to happen? How long?
Sorry,
Go ahead, Audreyanna.
Come in.
Dr. Hines, I'd also like to say this. When you let's do an assessment of the government, and this is also this is what facilitates the corruption, also incompetence. And the government is in terms of, if we're to say what are some of their strengths, the government is their initiators. They're good at initiating. I saw 2 days ago, I think in the Kaicher News, the editorial was 2 or 3 days ago about what happened to the initiative on strong families. Well, that initiative, I must say to the editor of the Kaicher News, that initiative on strong families, when I was running for president, one of the things I said I would do is develop strong families. So I have a feeling that the reason that just remained an initiative is because the president just took it and put it out there, but he doesn't have the information and the whole concept that I had. So he just put it out there. So since 2 years now, they can't develop it because it's somebody else's idea. But coming back to the so they're initiators. So we have a lot of things that you will find which are initiated, a lot of projects. They're also implementers. I think President Ali is a good implementer. Mr. Jagdeo is a good implementer also. The PNC on the Burnham time, the PNC had thinkers. We're looking at strengths and weaknesses, and the PNC had thinkers. They had good strategists. They were good in coordination. They were good in implementation, but not as good as they should have been because one, they didn't have the funds, but they were also finishers. This PPPC government, they're good in initiating and implementing. They're not good thinkers, strategists, coordinators, and finishers. And so even as we sort of rethink or reimagine Guyana and what kind of Guyana we want, we're moving into a next election. And if the coalition government should get into power, I really hope the coalition government should become the next government, because what is going to happen, the whole landscape in Guyana is going to change. The financial landscape, the banking landscape, it's going to change. And it's going to help to bring some balance and address some of the issues. But did I just say that? Yes, you did. So, but coming back, so if the let's say the next government has to think of how do we perform better than this government is performing. The APNU and the AFC government, they were good at they weren't good implementers. I'm not going to say what they were good at. I'm just going to say they weren't good implementers. And so I think the PPP government is beating them by being good implementers. But because the thinking process is absent and they're not thinkers and strategists and good coordinators and good finishers, we're having a lot of the issues and the challenges that we're having in terms of the conceptualization of plans and programs and policies and the design and the implementation. And so the next government has to have thinkers, strategists, coordinators, good implementers, and good finishers.
And the
I've
good
heard Mr.
finishers.
Jaggio, I'll pause here. I've heard people say, oh, Mr. Jaggio is a good strategist, right? You see how he removed the coalition government? People look at things like those and say, people say he's a good strategist. Look how he's opening up this country and building roads, right? And so this is where the implementation expertise comes in, but not, the implementation skill comes in. But if there were good thinkers and strategists, the implementation would have been more effective, more professional. The corruption would have been less, etc. The last point I want to make on this is that it is easier for a government in 5 years to do a lot of what we call in development the hardware. The hardware would be like building schools, building roads, etc., as against the software, which would be human development, capacity building, institutional strengthening, etc. You can't see institutional strengthening in 5 years necessarily. You can't see human development necessarily in 5 years. So I can understand the rationale to try to do the hardware more than you do the software. But then what we have an explosion of corruption in the society because we didn't focus on the software, the human development, the capacity building, etc., and we only focus on the hardware.
Sister Audreyanna Thomas here tonight, along with Win Matthews. Good evening to you, Raquel. You've been missing from school, Raquel Gentle, for a little while. Glad that you've come back out to school. Good evening to you, Sean Della, my cousin from Buxton. My condolences to you and your family on the passing of your auntie, Auntie Carmen. Well, Carmen was one of them lady in Buxton who was dear to my heart. My condolences to your family. Desiree said, well, I just get in trouble. Desiree Simons or Desiree Simmons? I don't want to. I teach in the United States, and when you call them, pick the name wrong, that they'll correct you right away. Desiree Simons or Desiree Simmons, who is a soldier of the struggle and who was here religiously. Good evening to you, Denise McKenzie. Good evening to all of you who are here in your numbers tonight. Audreyanna and Wayne, I'll give you all the opportunity for your closing thoughts, starting with you, Wayne.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Hines, for having me. I must first thank you. My closing remarks is that, for the last 5 years in government, we know that the PPP has been sitting there. And my expectation is that we will have a new government after 2025, providing there is free and fair election. Okay, so I'm going to jump the gun a bit and say for a new government, I believe one of the main focus of that new government, I'm not saying that infrastructure is not necessary, but we had 5 years of infrastructure. I believe it's time that we pay some measure of attention to the human capital in Guyana and, put mechanisms in place to try to eradicate poverty. I don't feel that it's fair that Guyana be ranked either between 1 and 3 fastest growing economy in 5 years, and we have 48 to 53% of our people living in poverty. The math is not math in there. That should not be. I don't care which government is in place. I don't care what the budgets look like, Dr. Hines. It is just flat out horrible. Okay, it should not be. Okay, and people have to start being accountable for these types of things. It should not happen. Okay, so a new government in place, I believe that human capital needs to be addressed seriously. Guyanese should not be living in poverty. We should not have a matriculation rate of 26% in the fastest growing economy when the coalition would have handed to the PPP. Okay, in 2020, a matriculation rate of 49%. It's not matching up, Dr. Hines. In my honest opinion, there is nothing good about this current government. Absolutely nothing. The cash grant they gave out, A lot of people did not receive it. Nothing has worked right under this government. Thank you so much for having me, Dr.
You
Hines.
are most welcome. Audreyanna, your closing thoughts.
Dr. Hines, I would like to see a new government after this election. I think that this PPPC government has taken, they've abused the authority that the people of Guyana has given to them to govern this country. And they have used the resources of this country in ways that is not reducing poverty. It is not, or it will not reduce poverty. It is not sustainable development. It is not sustainable governance. When you, for example, look at the private sector, for example, and you see some of the businesses developing, you realize that some of these businesses, or many of these businesses, will only survive if this government remains in power, or if a government is supporting them. A sustainable private sector, a sustainable business sector should not be built to primarily depend on the coffers of the state. At some point, these businesses must be able to feed from other aspects of the economy. And we're not seeing that. So the next, if there's a change in government, that new government will have the lessons from this government to learn from. The lessons from 2015 to 2020 to learn from. They would have the lessons of the previous 23 years of the PVC government and the lessons from the 28 years under the PNC government. And so this, whichever government, I'm hoping that the government will change, the next government will have an excellent opportunity to really transform Guyana into a sustainable economy, sustainable the country, and where to move the people of Guyana, or the masses of the people of Guyana, out of poverty up into the middle class. And so that we can say perhaps by 2035, sorry, that we are a middle class society, not only based on the reports from the IMF and the World Bank, but based on actuality, based on the quality of life of the people of this country.
Audreyanna Thomas, Sister Audreyanna Thomas, activist, social activist, environmental activist, and a political analyst in our own right. And Mr. Wayne Cesar, who is an accountant, but a political activist. And Wayne has his own program every Saturday night on 107.1. That's Mark Benshop's platform. That is called Over to You. I want to thank you all so much for coming on tonight and lending your rich analysis and perspective to our program. Thank you all very much. Asante Sana.
Thank you, Dr. Hines.
Thank you, Dr. Hines.
And keep
Good
up the
night,
good
everyone.
work. Wayne.
And to you, the audience, thank you all very much. Thank you to Dennis for your contribution. Thank you to Musasi for your contribution. And thank you to Natalie, Sister Natalie. You are a trooper. Without fail, you send your monthly contribution. Thank you so much. We are eternally and forever grateful. And when this moment of history is being written, it's people like you who walk the walk and talk the talk as we continue this journey to the other side, to paradise, to the other side of Jordan River. Again, thank you all so much for staying with us. Another Friday night, because Friday night is special. But you, of course, spend your Friday nights here with us, and we are grateful for that.
27 years or more, locked in captivity. Wisdom and hope for the poor, joy for you and me. Apartheid has no place in society. Black and white for equal opportunity. Democracy, peace, and freedom in one another. They won't stop the war. We can stop the arms. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. Welcome home, Mr. Mandela. Welcome home. 'Cause what we want a Mandela Day. We want a Mandela Day. Did you hear that? We want a Mandela Day. Well, we did it on Mandela Day. We want a Mandela Day. We want one. And guess what? If Mr. Mandela was here tonight, I know he would have felt very proud of you. And if he had had a chance to speak to you, I know he would have given you something like this. Now I'm back on my feet again. I walk proud down the street again, and they'll all look at me again, and they'll know that I'm strong. Oh, 'cause from a distance you look like my friend, even though we are at home. God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance. Bang, 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 bang. Hear me now, hear me now. Listen, brother, people said to hear me now, pom pom. And if Brother Bob Marley was here tonight, he too would have felt proud of you. And if he had a chance to sing something for you, I know he would have given you something like this.